Hi, this is Matt with the Intergalactic Herald. Welcome to my Star Atlas Week in Review podcast. This is podcast number 122. Any articles or videos mentioned can be found on my website at intergalacticherald.com. Just look for news recap number 170. Quick summary of things to go over. This past week, Beyond the Horizon published a second video about the Hall Sim, and then the big and only thing that really came out was the regular Atlas Brew with some announcements and additional Q&A on the C4. But before I get into talking about all that, just a couple quick things on Star Atlas projects I'm working on. Of course, my Intergalactic Herald website, which is a great resource for many things about Star Atlas, including a beginner's guide, these recaps that you're listening to. Additionally, I'm publishing some AI audio summaries of the Star Atlas community team, things like the Atlas Brews and the Lore Keepers, so you can check that out. And then I do have many directories of different Star Atlas things, from guilds to content creators to tools and things like that. Just recently put out a little bit of new information on my guide related to the Star Atlas preseason version of the UE5 engine, so there's a little bit there. And halfway through a project, which is to extract the announcements from the Star Atlas Discord and publish them on my website, and I'm going to convert that into an email newsletter too. So all that information, you can go to intergalacticherald.com and check that out. Two other projects that I'm working on, though I admit definitely less effort being put to them. One is my Star Atlas merch store at intergalacticgear.com, open for business. Just have a few items in this particular mugs and a few wall art. Do have a merch survey, so I'd love to get your input. And then I am working on another project, which is to create a Star Atlas community for gamers that don't want to join guilds. You can find that at intergalacticcoalition.com. There's an interest survey there. Once enough people like that idea, we'll start working on that. So anyways, go ahead and get into the main content section. It came out, I want to say it was on Saturday, so I knew about it when I did my last weekly recap, but I didn't really comment on it at the time because I want to watch both of them. But Beyond the Horizon, one of the Star Atlas YouTube content creators, created a walkthrough of Hall Sim, so I did a part 1 and part 2. They're both up there. I actually included them in my Star Atlas guide, but you can find that link in my news recap if you go to the website. And I'll have some more thoughts on Hall Sim, but it's really great to see that and see the experience, the initial part of there. So the big thing this past week was another Atlas Brew. The community team always has one on the Wednesday, so that's great. There was a couple announcements. One that was new was they didn't have a date, but they've done it in the past, which is the Star Atlas Community Week, which includes a couple traditions now within the Star Atlas community. One is a guild presentation called COPA. I forget what it stands for, but it's basically where the guilds get a chance to say what they've been working on the last year, and then it's a voting system. And then there are kind of community awards where different categories. I'm not sure what the categories are this year, but they did mention they'll have that. They're also going to include an esports tournament where different people can, it sounds like teams against the Star Atlas team playing in the Unreal shooter gunplay things. But it was just the initial thing that it's coming. And I think they said, not announcements, but nominations forms should be coming out in the future. So I assume we'll get some more information about when that'll occur or something like that. And then the bulk of the discussion was continuation of Q&A about different things that was announced at the town hall for the C4 version. So just as a quick reminder, C4 is 4 new gameplay styles, I guess we'll call it. These are all related to the Sage browser. I've heard it referred to as real-time strategy /4x/2D, but it'll be combat, claim stakes, crafting habs, and council rank. So there was more Q&A about that. Most of the questions were answered by Brett, the VP of Engineering, so that was great. Some of the questions were live, some were posted earlier in the Foundation Room. Definitely, Star Atlas TV has the entire recording. You can find that link on my news recap. I also have a AI summary of that if you just want to, I think it's like a 7-minute overview audio. You can check that out. Of course, you can read it. I just have an audio transcript on my website, so you can check that out. So I'm just going to comment on a few things that I found interesting. Some of it, there's more, but I just didn't write those down. So there was a few more answers on crafting habs, and I'm still unclear about them, but I think that's partly because there wasn't really a lot mentioned at the town hall. People have been more interested in combat and guess Council ranks one of those that needs more information. But again, some people asked some questions about that, so it came up. There was a question I thought was really interesting about moving from sector-based squares to more polygonal regions and different coordinate systems. But the real point that was brought up in one of the answers was that C4, and it sounds like SAGE in general, actually I shouldn't say SAGE in general, because this I would assume it applies to the 3D environment too, is going to be thought of more of a 2D, and that's not the right way to describe it. For people who remember algebra, or is it geometry? I can't remember. Anyways, you have X and Y coordinates, so that's 2D, and then you add Z, and that gives you the third dimension, Z. They said that really it's going to be X and Y, so hence 2D, so nothing to do with graphics, but just the coordinate system for the map. Yeah, sorry, that's a better way to say it. So it's how the map will function. So they said there might be some elevation Z coordinates, but really that's an entirely different kind of structure and does add a lot more complexity if you have a Z in it. So that was good, but it also makes sense. And even as I was looking more at the map myself and realizing that its current map in SAGE is basically a triangle with the central space stations and the points of the triangle, which is also where the safe zones are. And then in the middle is the high risk zone. And then everything else is the medium risk zones. Can't go outside the triangle, so it's not a true infinite universe that goes on forever. But again, it's a game. I say this, sorry, apologize. I wrote these questions earlier to the team in the Foundation room, and I forgot the Foundation room is public, so I can say that. Anyways, so actually I asked a question exactly like that. And I was wondering if the stars and the planets are infilling or if the map is growing. And the answer was the distances, I guess, were slightly changing, like the physical positions of the starbase, but it's basically that they were infilling, so there'll be more stuff inside. And that makes, again, perfect sense. Again, from a purely engineering standpoint, you can't have infinity. You have to hit something. But if you put enough stuff inside the boundaries, who's going to care? There's so much to explore and things like that. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I forgot. Foundation room is public now, so you can comment. So that was an answer. Anyways, this just reconfirmed that there isn't a plan to put in a 3-dimension. Then there was a number of questions about claim stakes. Basically, they can be placed anywhere. Again, I think on a planet. Crafting habs are what goes on star bases. So again, I'm starting to get a better sense of how those are different. Claim stakes can be put together, but it basically just does lay output. So it's not like if you could stack them or things like that. Some additional answers were given on the buildings that can go on claim stakes. And again, it sounds like they're from resources that you can mine to, and again, this is where I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, don't think you craft buildings. But maybe you do. But I think what was described was buildings aren't new assets as could be thought of as NFTs or compressed NFTs, CFTs. But I'm actually going to try to get a clarification on that because that makes sense. But then they're not unique. They're just in time. And part of my question, or part of my wanting to get clarification is, so we have ships that exist as assets you could sell. We have claim stakes that are assets. We have resources that are still assets. But if buildings are from resources, but then I'm like, can you sell a building? Anyways, that's fine. This is part of the Q&A and stuff like that. And then the last thing about claim stakes I wrote down was that our fleet can move resources from a claim stake out, though I would assume they can also move them in, especially if you need resources to build a building on your claim stake. So anyways, there was some additional information on star paths, which again are this new form of mode of transportation. So we got subwarp, we got warp, and now we have a star path. So there's a little more information there. And then the last one, and again, I admit this is partly because I was more interested in this, but somebody asked a question of how do repair and refueling ships work? And they said there will be no refueling, but there will be repair, and there will be repair of star bases and fleets. And so you might want to have a dedicated repair fleet as opposed to putting your repair ship within a fleet, which could still do repair. Again, definitely sounds like there's some specialization, which they have been mentioning, that now ships will do what their type is. So anyway, so again, that's not all the information I was provided. That's just the things that resonated with me. So again, please do check out both StarOS TV YouTube channel if you want to listen to the whole thing, or again, I have my AI summary of that Atlas brew on my website. So anyways, moving on to the next segment, just talk about where I think the state of Star Atlas is at this present junction, and I'll finish up with how I'm playing Star Atlas. So as far as state of Star Atlas, I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't really want to talk about Hall Sim last week when I did my weekend review because I wanted to watch the second one. And Beyond the Horizon, I think, did a great job just working through it. He would have to pause, though, of course, we didn't realize it, for something to occur, like an hour to move or something like that. But after watching both those videos, one thing I really came away with is I really liked the tutorials feature. And again, I know I'm a little biased because I have my beginner's guide on my website, but it was really nice to have, and I think it was actually great they did voice, even though if it turned out it was AI, who cares? It was just somebody reading. And so maybe it wasn't a voice actor per se, but it was voice. That really helped a lot, I think. And again, there's nothing wrong with reading, but I think there was something cool to hear somebody. And again, I haven't played it, so I don't know if literally the audio was the written text, but I would assume they were probably the same. But in general, I think having that learning information there, which has been completely missing up to this point in any Star Atlas product, I think is really great and definitely fits the hopeful goal, which we think we understand, is that Hall Sim is going to be for new players who have never touched Star Atlas to get into it. And then, I don't know, I'd say Beyond the Horizon, I'm not sure he went through all the tutorials, but it felt like a complete campaign, for lack of a better term, on something, because it was teaching the basics of movement and scanning and mining and transport. It really felt like a real game. And that's cool. Yeah, this is cool. Personally, I'm not sure I'm going to get involved in Hall Sim yet, and that's really partly twofold. One is just time. I'm still doing my things in, quote, real Sage. That's still my goals that I want to accomplish there. So adding another game that has been mentioned as beta, and even in the tutorials it said, I'll have this guide someday. Again, and it's not really that maybe there's a award system. I know the original thought was there going to be like seasons in Hall Sim. And I think these are all great, but it's starting to feel more, and I think this was the original intent, is it's okay, or I should say it's not okay. The goal was that Star Atlas you would never be able to do everything as one person. That's also a backbone for why there would be economy, because you need producers and consumers. So if everybody's doing everything, you don't need other people. It feels, hey, it's okay. I don't have to do everything. But I'm glad it's there. It looks really interesting. Definitely seeing the Star Atlas Discord. There's lots of comments in the Hall Sim channel. Definitely sounds like the team is taking advice and making, or maybe not making changes, but definitely. And so, again, from a personal standpoint, it's just not something I want to spend time on right this second, but I'm so glad that it exists and moving forward. So related to the C4, it's still very interested in all these details that are coming out. I think this is really great. As I may have mentioned, and if I haven't, I will now, I am definitely much more personally interested in the claim stakes. It fits some of the original RTS strategies I like to do. Not that combat in RTSs was boring. You had to get your economy going first before you could get your factories going or whatever to manufacture soldiers and tanks and all that kind of stuff. So it was always the first part of the game. So I guess I'm leaning toward, hey, I want to get my economy working, and now it starts to feel like claim stakes are that next thing. Not that mining is going away, but it sure feels like at least a mining ship should be good at mining, but it sounds like they're mining asteroids. So it's something you do in space, where claim stakes is something you put down on a planet. And now with the idea of buildings, again, we haven't been told what the buildings do, but I'm going to assume they create things. So again, pure speculation on my part. It's like we have crafting now where you take a raw material and make it into a compound thing. Sure feels like that should be a building factory as opposed to just this nebulous crafting on a space station. And again, maybe that's where the crafting habs come in play. Again, totally speculating. They didn't talk about it, but feels like it's finally turning this vague concept of crafting into, oh, hey, I got a building and it does this, or I have a crafting habitat and it does that. One's on a planet, one's on a space station. Again, it feels like the natural progression of how to build out these operations within the game. Yeah, so I'm leaning toward claim stakes as being something interesting. And then I thought I would end up with just truly some speculations that are not based on anything except me just trying to connect dots. One thing I'm thinking more and more is that they have been mentioning a lot of details, and I think what was fascinating about the last two Q&As, because there were questions and answers as opposed to the town hall where they were presenting about the different aspects of C4, Actually, let's just stick with C4 because technically the last two Atlas brews were only about C4. They had nothing to do with Unreal Engine or HoloSim. Yeah, those were the three things that were mentioned at the town hall. Yeah. The fact that a Q&A could occur and lots... I was noticing the person, Brett, was saying that's a design question or that's an economy question. So again, he's VP of engineering and I assume dealing with the programming and the blockchain stuff, not does this thing do 2x? You know, that could be an economy question or what type of building, that's a design question. So the fact that those three, and I'm not sure those are the only three, but engineering, economy, design, that if almost every question had an answer, makes me feel like this thing has moved quite forward along. And I'm going to use the word design, not in the context of the three things I just mentioned, but they are definitely know what they're working on. So if we just look at a project plan, we're not at the beginning of this project. We're definitely way further in. Maybe it's refinement phase and whatever. Yeah, so I'm not really 100% sure where the development is, but I speculate that there's more to this C4 release related to, and I just use the word programming logic, as opposed to design. In this case, I don't mean the design of the program logic, the physical design, as pictures and movements and things like that. And part of the reason I'm wondering about that is because HoloSim is definitely a offshoot of Sage. Again, it looks like the same map. It has different parts of the interface because of the training and these missions and chat and other things. But for example, HoloSim has combat. So if HoloSim has combat, it would be not much of a step to think that's similar to be what the combat will be in the updated Sage C4. So they're way further along in something like combat. Maybe don't think claim stakes exist in HoloSim, don't think crafting habs, but they could. Council rank just seems like a progression thing in the back. So anyways, what I'm vague about all of this is that what is typically always answered in the Star Atlas Discord is when. And at the town hall, it was, as I mentioned, I just felt overwhelmed with too much information. But now as the weeks have gone on, I realize there was too much information. That's, what's the smoke fire thing? If there's a lot of smoke, there's probably fire. Some poor analogy here. There's a lot of information. There's probably a lot we're not seeing. That's making me feel like, as much as at the beginning I was kind of like, yeah, there's a lot to bite off here with 4 different things. But those 4 things really do feel, when they all come together, are a true game that, yeah, it all starts to make sense. So especially now that we see how HoloSim, it feels like, again, things are there. And again, maybe it's the fine-tunement of the actual design of what the things do and the economy on how they do it. But the engineering side, the development, the programming, yeah, I mean, it feels like there's a lot there. And then the other thing that they have been mentioning is that there will be a public beta of C4. And unlike Bozia beta, but what it sounds like on this beta is that it will be the next version of the game with fake assets, so people can get in and actually do it. Again, the downside is it seems like we're going to have to move from what they've said, a game ID. So take all your assets, put them back in your crypto wallet, and then bring them back into the new game, because they've done this once before. But now that we're doing it this time, and the fact of all of the complexity that is being proposed for C4, it all makes sense. I do hope at some point this stops, because it's a lot of effort. But again, there was no promise that this is the game, and if this is the technical implementation of a transition, again, we can holler and complain all we want, but again, you got to have the right foundation. So if you're moving from sectors with these 60-some things to coordinate systems with thousands of things, again, it's unfortunate, but you can't get too upset about it. Yeah, I think that public beta makes a lot of sense. It sounds like a great rollout plan. And now, as the time has gone on, what I was mentioning earlier months ago about the rollout of local markets and fleet rentals, local markets for sure, there was lots of talking about it before it happened, and that kind of got us all prepared. My biggest complaint was 4 things instead of 1, but again, you pull them all off, so be it. So again, it does feel like this is Again, I'm speculating, but this is part of the rollout plan. We're seeing Holocim because it's a functional thing. Again, it has a different purpose, but it does use some of the, I would assume, use some of the existing technologies like combat. And then we're seeing these other things, and we're getting answers to questions that aren't like, we haven't thought about that yet. They all have answers. It's, but maybe we're not exactly sure, is 100 buildings or 1,000 buildings, something like that. That's fine. If you figured out one building, you can figure out an unlimited number of buildings. Yeah, I guess I still feel like there's a lot of pressure to put out this all-in-one release because, again, there are so many features, but notwithstanding, if that is the goal that occurs, this does feel like, and I've used this word before about engaging game, the depth of possibilities. So we still keep mining and transport and scanning. The game is expanded to claim stakes and crafting hubs and progression through council rank and the wild card of combat and losing things. Bluntly, that sounds like a game. And it sounds like a game you would show up every day. If there's one, again, since I'm speculating, there's still that one concern, and it's been that concern that has been brought up quite a bit, is can small gamers really participate? But I think I'm still concerned about that. But I can definitely now see, well, it depends. If you truly just want to play something, then that's where Holocim comes into play, a free-to-play. Doesn't cost any money to get involved, doesn't have to get involved with crypto. You just go in, play something, browser-based. They alluded to that it could actually be turned into a mobile app because it doesn't have the exposed crypto things with, I guess the app stores don't like crypto, that you could play. And then decide if you want to actually, and I know the word invest is got double meanings within the financial community, but again, invest in paying $60 for a game with a $20 monthly contribution, which is one of the videos I created. Again, I still think you can start out small, but if you buy a few ships right out of the gate to play the real Sage, and there's something you can do with, again, all the different levels of depth that exists in the new Sage C4, as I mentioned in my video, you can buy a ship, you can buy a claim stake, and now those claim stakes even have more than when I made the video. I still feel like that's an entry point. Maybe it's not $100. Maybe the start is $200, and then you have to put in monthly money to pay for your Solana fees and things like that. People do that right now with existing non-Web3 crypto games. And then the last thing, that some people can just play the preseason, which so far doesn't, again, it's still in beta, so there's absolutely nothing to play or pay. But even if you did, it would seem, again, speculating, that your entry point is you buy a crew member. That could be, I think they're $5. So that's fine. You buy a crew, and now you can go and or customize that thing, do some progression as you play different gunplay or racing games or whatever. That's a perfectly valid entry point. So where I'm going with all this is that potentially, if Sage C4 version really isn't focused on small gamers, I'm not really so sure that's a bad thing anymore. I think you compare it to what we have now, is there's nothing else to do. There's not a compelling reason necessarily to go into the gunplay mode every day. Sure, you can play with people that might be good for guilds or whatever, but just random person hears about the game. But that's okay. Sage isn't for them. And again, this I think goes back to this philosophy the teams have been very mentioning, is that you're not supposed to be one person doing everything. Now again, people like whales, that could work. So that's fine. That's a different gameplay style. Small gamers who have a limited amount of money they want to put into the game may not have all this routes in the Sage economy. But again, there's Holocim, there's preseason and things like that. So again, it's all starting, I think, fall into place, and it will be interesting to see as the next few months go by how things continue to progress with rumors, or not rumors, they keep talking about a new version of the preseason to come out this summer, which I think was accidentally slipped. It was July, but they had been going on a pretty regular cadence, so that all kind of makes sense. And obviously Holocim exists now. It just needs to be refined, and then they've talked about, again, what are they called, seasons or whatever. And then C4 is the more elaborate part of the game. So all in all, yeah, it's all speculation, but I'm at least for me, starting to feel like how you can connect the dots and see how this roadmap is moving forward. with the Ultimate thing, I think, regardless of their gigantic roadmap, I'm still judging it on what can we do now. And as of now, compared to the last few years, what's right on the horizon feels so radically different than what it has been in the past, where these are things that move forward, quote unquote, are engaging. You could go into it each day and have some fun. Yeah, all feels really good. So anyways, so I'll stop my speculating and just wrap up with some of my talk about my journey playing Star Atlas. So we've been following along, finally finished mining, started trying to get a Mamba X. So I finished mining diamond. I moved my big fleet out there and helped out my little miner guy. And so we got to I think it was 77.8 million diamond. So yay. Partly it was just slow going because of the hardness diamond. But anyway, so I finished that. So I moved the miner. And again, my ultimate goal is to find all the raw resources. But I decided, because we know that going forward there'll be combat, and my little transport fleets probably are really open to attack, why don't I hurry up and get all the stuff while it's easy from the farther things and then move closer to the Central Space Station. So I finished up at Diamond. I think it was MRZ 12. And then I moved to the next first one, which was titanium ore. 6 million? I can't remember. Look at my papers. No. 8 million. 8 million of those. So I moved my miner down to there, and he's slowly working away there, filling it up with food from the local market. So that's cool. Don't have to bring anything there. No ammo because it's a miner. Transporting all the diamond back. Of course, it's the furthest one away, so it takes many hours one way, I think. I'm not sure if it's round trip. But so I was doing that. But then I had this idea, and I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I heard it from someone else, so I can't take credit for this. But it's going out from the Central Space Station empty and bringing back full load of diamond. But local markets provide the opportunity for arbitrage. I don't need any fuel, ammo, or food at the Starbase because nobody's mining there, but I could put it on the market. And so I did a quick calculation of how much in Atlas those three things were at the Central Space Station as opposed to the local market at MRZ 12. Yeah. And it's higher now. I realized, is it worth the difference? And I was like, but it doesn't matter. So theoretically, again, if I understand economics, you can buy it at one price and sell it at a higher price, and you pocket the difference. Then you got to calculate your other costs. This fleet's going out there no matter what, whether it's empty or full. It doesn't take more fuel, doesn't eat more food. It just goes. So send it out. So yeah, so I'm actually sending out there, and I realized I bought some supplies, but so they wouldn't run out, and then the automation would fail. But I realized one of those resources was fuel, and I have a ton of that. So it just filled up with a little bit of fuel, so I had to redo the configuration. So what I'm actually doing is taking my claim stake rewards, putting them on that transport, sending them out to that Starbase, which I'll then sell in the local market, and then it gets bring back diamond. So actually, I'm like, that's cool. Again, small scale, obviously, but hey, still pretty cool. So yeah, so that's what I'm actually doing on that. Yeah, moving diamond back, taking out some resources. Tomorrow when I do my kind of engagement of moving junk or selling junk on the market, so I'll put those in there and we'll see. But yeah, so that's a kind of a cool little find. And again, I know I read that from someone else, so I didn't invent that. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So again, small scale supply chains, but supply chain nevertheless. So yeah, just moving ahead on that. So anyway, so that wraps that up. Thanks for listening to everything. Just as a reminder, totally open to anyone who wants to be a guest on the podcast. Definitely looking for any community members who just want to talk about the week in review. Obviously open to any content creators who want to get on, talk about their stuff, Star Atlas builders, team members. Again, definitely open to anyone who wants to give me a part of their day to have a chat. If you're interested, go to intergalactichero.com, look for the contact page, and you just fill that out there. And then just real quick on my 3 Star Atlas projects, of course, my website, Intergalactic Herald, got guides, resources, audio, everything in one place. Check that out, intergalactichero.com. My merch store is open for business at intergalacticgear.com. And if you're interested in hanging out with other Star Atlas gamers who aren't members of guilds, please check out Intergalactic Coalition. And we're trying to get a group of people there together. So anyways, thanks for listening to my week in review. Yep, this is Matt. Have a great week ahead.